Hey, in a previous video I showed you, this is out back of my house, an area where the fascia looked like it had some rot. The paint was kind of bubbly looking. It looked like that. And I started poking around and you can see what's happening here. Originally, I thought it was an easy fix, and there's a couple of reasons why I wanted to show you this. Because sometimes what seems like an easy fix, and this is whether you learn how to do this stuff or not, if you have somebody else do it for you, I'm doing this for you so you can learn a couple of things. One is to keep yourself from getting ripped off, but the other is so you can see that sometimes things can go from bad to worse, and what seems like an easy fix is not so much. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pulling Humpty Dumpty apart. And first of all, it does not surprise me at all that this happens, or this has happened, by a gutter. Gutters cause more problems than you can imagine because none of us get up there and clean them out like we're supposed to. And what happens is they overfill, the water backs up underneath the roof line, back behind the fascia, and then there's moisture there. In this case, when I started poking around, I had a couple of hundred Carpenter ants fall out. There was a nest there. It makes a perfect place for a nest because they've got darkness and moisture, just like termites. That's all they need for a nice nest. But in any event, let me start identifying some of the pieces and parts here that we're going to take apart, and some others that we're not. This is the gutter. This is the end of the gutter. So, as I said, we don't clean them out, so they overflow and back up behind the fascia and cause a problem. This is the fascia board. This right here is called the drip edge. Underneath the drip edge, there's a 1x2, what I call a standoff. And this house was built back in the 70s when that was common practice to use a 1x2 standoff, and that kept the drip edge away from the fascia. In a lot of newer construction now, they're eliminating this and just putting the drip edge right up against the fascia. So if you're out shopping for houses and you see that, where that 1x2 is not there, don't buy that house, because I promise you, you'll be doing a lot of fascia repair over the years because the water that drips off of the drip edge drips onto the fascia as well. So anyway, we've identified this is the fascia, this is the drip edge, this is the 1x2 standoff. The part underneath is called the soffit. The under part of the overhang of your roof is called the soffit. This here was a porch enclosure that was done long before I got here. And I always found it curious, first of all, that there's a notch here. And second of all, they've got a 2x4 on the flat, which seemed like a kind of a bobbled way of doing things. I don't know what they ran into behind there that caused them to do it this way. But I also see some bellying in the soffit material. So I'm going to pull Humpty Dumpty apart for you. We're going to see how things go from bad to worse. Behind the fascia, I'm just kind of poking in there. The fascia is attached to what's called the subfascia, and that's usually a 2x6. The depth of this wood rot goes deeper than the thickness of the fascia itself, and goes into that subfascia, but it does not go all the way through. which tells me it's probably salvageable. So we're going to come in here, we're going to find the end of where our rod is. We're going to make a cut. I'm not going to do it. This is actually a drywall saw. I'm just using it to point and poke around. And then we're just going to start pulling Humpty Dumpty apart. And let's see what we got going. Okay, after digging along here, I found that my damage ends right about there and extends not too far past the end of the gutter. So we're going to go ahead and take that piece all the way from the wall. We'll use a Sawzall to cut along here. This will just come right out, and we'll use a what's called a torpedo level to draw a perpendicular line to make a cut with our Sawzall. A perpendicular line. We want what's called a plumb line. Plumb is the vertical equivalent of level. So if I cut a plumb line, then I know that my new piece, when it gets put back in, will be nice and square with the old piece that it's going to butt up against. So I'm going to draw my line right now. Okay, you can't tell from your angle, but that is perfectly plumb. So we're going to mark a line just like that. That's how it's done. Okay, with my reciprocating saw, that's a reciprocating saw or Sawzall, I'm going to make my vertical cut and start off slow. It has a tendency to want to bounce around. You want to get it You can see it wants to wander. I won't bore you too much. There's the finished cut, our vertical cut. Like I said, we're going to take it all the way back to the wall. I've removed some of the staples holding the telephone wire, the old telephone wire, and then we're going to take a Sawzall on an angle and cut right up in there along to until where we meet the damage, and then we'll pull that piece right out. The more I look at this and get in here, the more I am starting to suspect that the sub fascia has got more damage than I may have originally thought, but we'll pull it apart and we'll see what we got. This is kind of like doing exploratory surgery. Okay, I've cut along there, and then I did a cut here in the center, and that'll make it easy for us to get a hold of it and pull this out. See the damage to the outside rail in here, but here it's not too bad, really. Now when I say outside rail, I mean sub fascia. Sometimes I use my own lingo. Now this piece, sub fascia, not too bad. So we got here, we've got some digging out to do, but not so bad. Like I said, that soffit is kind of bellied. I don't know whether you can see it very well, but it is, and likely from water getting up in there. It looks like I've got a couple of nails here, so there's a nailer. Actually, I'll pull this out real quick. Yep, you can see a 2x4 nailer right there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this portion of the soffit. I'll get that board off of there, and then we'll find out why they did that the way they did it anyway. but I won't bore you with the details. But once we've got that opened up, you'll be able to see just exactly how all this is constructed. And we'll get to it in just a second. Okay, now we got it all opened up and we can see how things are put together. First of all, you've all been up in your attic. You've seen the roof trusses with the webbing, and that's designed for strength to support the weight of the roof. This particular house, you can see the roof decking that's 1x10 boards. Nowadays, well, there was a time they used plywood instead after the boards, and then they used the compressed strand board, neither of which are anywhere near as strong as these old boards are. That's one of the reasons I like these older houses. They're put together pretty well. Now, I talked about digging out that sub fascia or outside rail. I could do that and make a repair. As long as I've got everything opened up though, I'm going to go the extra step just to show you what the right kind of repair would be here. And the reason I'm going to do that, or one of the reasons, is because I'm not going to get up there and clean the gutter in the next 10 years any more than I did in the last 10 years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this sub fascia, or I call it outside rail. And what I'm going to do is come back to the end of where the rod is, and I'm going to cut it. I'll be using my Sawzall, and that's going to cause a little cut there, but we'll caulk that over. And one of the things that makes this kind of complicated is because in order to get that outside rail out, it's nailed from this side, and then we're behind the gutter, but it's nailed into what's called, these are the rafter tails that you see here coming down on an angle. It's nailed into them. So we've got to get a blade in there on that Sawzall. We'll use a metal blade to cut the nails that support it, and we got to cut it at each rafter tail for as far back as we want to replace it. Then, to make matters even a little bit more complicated, there are nails coming down into that outside rail or sub fascia, coming down into it through the decking material. So once we've got it cut, and once we've got the nails cut that are nailed into the rafter tails, we still have those nails that are coming down into it to contend with, and they're going to be, once we get it out of there to put a new piece in, and we'll be using pressure treated, we've got those nails up there to contend with. We're going to have to cut those off and get those out of the way, or we're not going to be able to slide our new piece in. As to why that 2x4 was there on the flat, and as to why the fascia had that notch in it, that was just an absolute bobblehead coming in, trying to deal with the fact that the soffit material, and it's called MDF material, it's like a press board. It's not my favorite material because it does not stand up well to when it gets wet, and that's what was happening back in here. It was getting wet and you're getting sagging baggage, and so whoever it was came in and decided to put that piece in, and first they tried to notch it and they were going to do something else, and then with regard to the cut that I made, we talked about there's a nailer here. You can see I was cutting along as close to the edge of the nailer as I could, so that when I go to put my next piece in, what I would do is attach a 2x4 right to the edge of this one, and that would give me something to nail or screw my new piece into. And I see that in the construction of the house, I used a square to make a nice straight perpendicular cut. And whoever put this nailer in didn't take that extra 10 seconds, and that nailer is so crooked that as I was making my cut, I sort of sideswiped it because it was in the way. So anyway, don't be one of those people. If you hate your job that much to where you're gonna not take any pride in your work, go find something else to do, and don't affect the people that come behind you to try to do things right. Now I'm gonna have to take the Sawzall, get in between the nailer and cut that nail, cut that nail. I'm gonna have to cut the nails here, and I'm gonna have to relocate this so that it's square, so that I can scab onto it properly, and my new piece, I'll have a nailer for that. But that's where we're at. We're gonna, like I said, go the extra mile and remove that outside rail and replace it with pressure treated, and we'll continue. Incidentally, just a little segue, I don't think I showed you what a Sawzall really is. Most people in the contracting business call it a Sawzall. It's a reciprocating saw is the technical name. Reciprocating because the blade goes in and out like that when you pull the trigger. It has, in this case, I've got a rough cut wood blade on it right now, and that's just because I just did that vertical cut on the end of where the wood rot was in the outside rail or subfascia. And then this is a metal blade. You can see it's got finer teeth, and we're going to be using that now to cut those nails that we talked about. Okay, I know that that video was shaking quite a bit there. I'm doing this by myself, so I had to attach the camera to the other end where the fascia still remains. In any event, let's take a minute here. I wanted to show you what's going on. We've obviously nipped those nails like we talked about at the rafters. We've nipped the nails coming down through the roof decking. You can see there's still some wood rot up there in the roof decking itself. That's okay. That's not that big a deal, and that's more something to be dealt with when a new roof gets put on. That's at that point easy enough to fix. Trying to deal with it from underneath is probably will cause more trouble than it's worth. When I had said that the gutters cause a lot of problems, and here is exactly why. You see the drip edge here? When they install gutter, they cut that drip edge and they install the gutter right up behind it. And so when that gutter fills up and the weight of the water pushes it up behind the drip edge that's there, and then it goes in behind the fascia, and that's what causes all the problems. We did get lucky. Sometimes the rafter tails will get rotted out. We didn't have that problem. You're probably why I wrote "You're welcome" there. Actually, if you watch till the end of the video, I'll tell you why. You'll see why that's there. That's a message to someone. We also had talked about having to nip the nails up in here because this nailer that the other dude installed was so crooked. So we've done that. So that nailer is attached at the back, but it's floating now, so to speak. And what we'll need to do is what's called scabbing on. We'll cut another piece of 2x4 and we'll screw it to this one. And because that guy had it so crooked in here to begin with, in order to get square, we got to move that quite a bit. And we're probably going to have to do a double scab in order to get enough material, 2x4 material, to attach our new piece coming in. The outside rail we cut, and we're halfway across the rafter tail, so that gives us meat to attach to. And so that's where we're at right now. And incidentally, the new outside rail or subfascia is going to be pressure treated, so that's not going to rot out. But that's where we're at right now. Okay, to sort of take a look at where we're at here. The first thing you might notice is these screws I've got here. At one point when I stood back here and was looking at this area, there was a tiniest bit of a belly. And so what I did is I took a 2x4 up through there and laid it across on a flat and had it nice and square across there. And then I walked screws into it to draw that belly up right into it, and that worked beautifully. We talked about scabbing on to that 2x. I had one scab was almost enough, but I decided to go with another one just to make sure I got plenty of meat to screw into. Those of you that might be a little extra observant may notice that right there. And why is that? Looks like it's low. I've set it low. The reason why is that right there. You see that outer 2x is on an angle, and that brings it downward. So it basically lines up perfectly. I'm going to be now getting ready to put the new fascia board in, and you can see I've got this here is what's called a compound miter, where there's actually two angles. There's a 45 and then whatever angle that is. I only need to cut a 45 for my fascia to cross over and match up over here. And what I'm going to do real quick, I'm just going to do just a brief segue into a circular saw. By no means is it a comprehensive introduction, but again, I think everybody should have some power tools on hand. And so I'll just give you a brief introduction. Okay, I'm going to try to be pretty quick. This is a circular saw. The reason why they call it a circular saw is because the blade goes in a circle when you pull the trigger. This is battery powered. Do not be under the impression that just because it's battery powered it is not dangerous. It will bite you. It will take a finger off in the blink of an eye. So always safety is of utmost importance. Before you manipulate the saw in any way, you always want to take the battery off. So I'm going to do that and remove it while I show you just a couple of features of a circular saw. One is that this is the safety guard as you're cutting through material passing through, that guard is going to move out of the way, and then when your cut is done, it returns back to its starting point. That way it's protecting any surface you might lay it on, or any, if your fingers happen to be in there, which your fingers should never be anywhere near that blade. Another feature of a circular saw is that you can change the depth. That's done with this little handle at the back. We can raise and lower the tray to whatever depth we want. You can see now I've got that almost all the way up, and you can see it wouldn't cut very deeply, and that comes in handy sometimes when we're cutting something that's really thin, and if we're cutting 2x4s or something thicker, we want to be at full depth, and that's what that's for. Something to mention here is that prior to maybe a couple of years ago, most of the battery-powered circular saws were 5.5 inch blade diameter. This one and a lot of them now are 7.25, which is just like the corded ones. So that's a wonderful thing, because the 5.5s could barely make it through the thickness of a 2x4. So that I'm glad to see that they're coming out with these with the bigger diameter. To change the angle of the cut, that fascia out there, I'm going to have to cut a 45-degree angle. So the way I do that is loosen this, and I change that to a 45, and I tighten it down, and I make my cut, and then I'll return it back to the straight 90 degrees. This, I don't remember what I told you, I just got this yesterday, as a matter of fact. As far as my preference, Dewalt is like the top of the line. That's for somebody that's using them all the time. They will last a good long time, but they are expensive. The next step down is Milwaukee's. I do like them. They're very, very good, very durable, well made, and not quite as expensive. I'm going to put some links down below for some of these tools, just so if you want to do any shopping, that it's there for you. I think people should have some tools on hand, some power tools, learn how to do a few things around the house. I know a lot of people, especially young people these days, a lot of them were not brought up with somebody that taught them how to do this sort of stuff. So that's kind of why I'm doing, this and some of the other videos, to just introduce you to some of these things. And even if you don't wind up doing it yourself, at least you can know a little bit about it, so to keep you from getting ripped off by somebody who might recognize that you know nothing. In any event, I just think it's good to try to share some of this, and hopefully it'll help some people out there. But that's just a brief introduction. There are all kinds of videos out there on in-depth use of all these kinds of power tools. I would encourage you to watch them. And again, safety is the primary concern. But right now I'm going to get back out there and get to that fascia. Hey everybody, we got it buttoned up and caulked in. I was almost done caulking it in, and I had this section here left to do, and it dawned on me that some of you may not know how to caulk. So I set up the camera and hooked it to the fascia and was pointing in that direction so you could see what I was doing. And so I was caulking and talking, and then I got done and looked at it, and my getting in there to actually do the caulking, you were just looking at a nice close-up of the back of my arm. So anyway, I owe you a caulking lesson, but anyway, that's easy to do. I can teach you later, or there's plenty of videos about that. I wanted to point out a couple of things. Everything is caulked in. This area here, that's not routed out. That's just stain from where a rusty nail was. What I've done is I've left a gap along here for moisture to be able to get out. Another thing to take notice of when you're doing repairs, this is called rough cut cedar. So you know, rough cut cedar has a rough side, and you can see it more here, and then it has a smooth side. So we want the rough side out to match what the existing is. And then when I caulk that in, I always do put a little extra caulk so that I can come in with a putty knife and I can kind of rough it up and give it good texture instead of it being smooth, because that would look, it just wouldn't look well. Here on the underside it's smoothed out, and here on the back side where it's a smooth surface, it's smoothed out as well. Something also to be aware of when you're doing repairs, the lumber today is the slightest bit thinner than the lumber of yesteryear. So when I put the new piece in, what I have to do is use a shim, and that's just a little thin piece of wood that you slide up in there. It's sort of a wedge, and once you've got it to where your outside is flush, then you cut off your shim, and so they match on the outside there. Another thing you'll notice, usually at a joint, because over time sometimes you can get warping, and we don't want this piece to warp in a different direction than this one. They'll spread apart. And so what I've done, and what most carpenters will do, is run what's called a toenail, or in my case what I did here is a screw. And all a toenail is, or a toe screw, is something that's nailed in or screwed in on an angle from one piece into another, and that ties the two of them together so they don't separate. Additionally, I've left a gap here to help moisture get out of there. At my joint, I've installed a batten, and then you might wonder how I determine the angle that I'm cutting on the batten. And what you do is you use what's called an angle finder. It's adjustable, and you determine the angle, and then you come back out and you adjust your saw blade to that angle. So in any event, it's caulked in, it's ready for paint, and we'll get to that, and then we'll see what it looks like. Okay, here it is, all done. It's got 2 coats of paint on it, and a tip for you with regard to painting, and especially when you're painting like new repairs, new material. Don't try to pull it off in one coat. Paint it and let it dry in, and then come back and give it a second coat. You'll see areas where you'll think, well, maybe I missed a spot. Nah, you didn't miss a spot. The rough cut cedar, for instance, drank it in, and it wants a little more. So anyway, give it a couple hours and put a second coat on. It's a good finish. You can see why I would have taken a little extra time to take a putty knife and rough up that. It's not that I'm trying to hide the joint. It's more that I didn't want to have a smooth joint, because that would have flashed at you once it was painted. We got a new vent piece put in there. Everything really turned out well. I took my time, I did it right. I took pride in what I was doing, and Now, I promised you I would tell you why I put that message in there that said you're welcome back inside there on that 2x4. And what that's for is this repair is going to outlast me, but I also know another thing, that because of that gutter there, and because people don't get up and clean their gutters out like I don't, that someday that's gonna rot again, and for whoever comes in to fix it, they're going to realize, you can see I did not caulk the screws. And by the way, it would have been a lot easier for me to pull out my nail gun and just nail it all together and boom, boom, boom. But I didn't. And I didn't even use a nail here on that joint that we talked about. I used a screw, and in order to use a screw there, I had to drill it first, because if I'd have just tried to screw into it, the material is thin, so it would have split the wood. And what the person who comes in behind me is going to come to realize when they start to take this apart is that they're only going to need one tool, and that's a screw gun, to take it all apart. And once they get done, they're going to realize I did it the way that I did it for them, and then they're going to see that message, you're welcome. And that's for whoever. Sometimes you get a chance to talk to the future, so that's just a little message to the future from the past. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. I hope this was helpful for somebody out there.